Hi, my name is John Molina. I'm the president of By Design Visuals, and I want to welcome to a demonstration of the Genesis series, the foundational piece for the By Design Visual series that's been created over the last number of years for chronological Bible storytelling. If you're familiar at all with Flannelgraph, this will look very, very normal. We have our Flannelgraph board here, the By Design Visuals Flannelgraph board that this actually breaks down into 1/4 size as opposed to just half size. You can carry this in any kind of a suitcase and even a carry-on, or even possibly putting in a backpack and take it with you all around the world. We have the main background here, this water and sky background, that everything else is basically built off of when we tell our stories. And so I'm going to be showing you some of the backgrounds that are available with the By Design Visual series, and then a little bit later on, I'm going to actually do a story with you and let you participate, and I hope it'll be a lot of fun. One of the first backgrounds, we simply call this the nighttime sky, and this is a very, very versatile background. It simply goes over the top, but there's two sides to this background. At the beginning of creation, you remember, even before the sun and the moon and the stars were created, it was just black. And the Spirit of God was moving upon the face of the waters. But 3 days later, when God creates the sun, the moon, and the stars, then you can take this and you can flip this the other way, and suddenly you have what you need for that. So we've tried to make these very, very versatile and being able to use in a lot of different combinations. Well, not everything took place on water. Many of the stories in the Bible also took place on land. We call this the meadow background, and just like it says, it's a grassy area, grassy meadow area. And I'm going to wrap. You'll notice that these backgrounds, almost all of them, have some extra fabric, have some extra felt on the side that's white. There are Velcro strips on the back of this board that all of the backgrounds attach to, so they don't fall off. And so I've already attached this on the other side. I'm going to attach this to the Velcro on the back, and away that goes. So as we use Flannelgraph, we build our scenes kind of bit by bit. We'll put the different type of scene on. This is a road that can be used many times in the stories of the Bible. People are going somewhere. You might have a part of the story here, and we'll have some larger figures. And there's actually the figures of the By Design Visual series are actually sized for where they're going to be on the board. If they're going to be shown in the distance, they're going to be smaller. If they're going to be shown closer up, they're going to be full size, which are about on average of 12 inches in height. Let me remove this, and we'll just take us back to a daytime sky. Move this up a little bit. Some of our ocean is being seen there. Remember in the Genesis series, of course, it's pretty much after the creation and the beginning of the world and the Noahic flood. We move into Genesis chapter 12, and we have Abraham and Sarah and Lot and those stories. The Abraham series actually has 18 different stories from the life of Abraham. And because they're nomads, I mean, they're moving around, they're wandering through the country by God's direction. Well, they spend their lifetime living and moving in cities and in tents, this sort of thing. So these are actually figures. I'm going to put Sarah up here. You can see the figures are already sized to go with the background that's needed. So this tent overlay looks this way. So she's sized to look very realistic. But what if you want to move a little bit further away? Well, there's another version of that tent that is just a little bit smaller. Of course, now if you want to move Sarah away from that, you can do that, and that would look correct. But if you want to have her right by the tent, the figures of this series are already pre-sized so that they look where they're supposed to. Another thing that's rather unusual, or certainly unique about the By Design Visual series, Many of the series actually, some of the figures even age. So like here with Sarah, you have Sarah when she's a little bit younger, when they first enter the land of Canaan. And then you have Sarah when she's older. Remember how old she was when she gave birth to Isaac?
She 19?
Very good. She was 90 years old. And so at this time, she's looking a little bit older. And so we have the same thing with both sizes with Sarah. So this is pre-sized. Let me show you some other backgrounds that go along very, very well with this background. This is the cliff. We call this the cliff overlay. There's backgrounds. The backgrounds cover pretty much most of the board. This would be the water sky background. This is the meadow background. The overlays, simply just as it says, they lay over the other backgrounds and they're layered on to give a certain effect. This particular one, this cliff, is actually used in a story with Abraham, where some angels and some messengers are actually moving off into the distance, moving towards Sodom and Gomorrah. There's another figure of a pre-incarnate Jesus Christ that is attached to this. And you remember they have that conversation about whether or not God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah if there's 50 righteous in the city? And God says, no, he won't. He says, well, what if we're lacking 5? And God says, no, I won't destroy it if there's 45 righteous. And it goes down 40, 30, 20. It's all the way down to 10. And then God leaves Abraham, and Abraham goes back home to where Sarah was in the previous story. And so this overlay is used for that. Now there's another overlay that is very, very famous in the life of Abraham. And that's, we call this rock formation. Let me put this up here. Just like the other one, just goes right on top. Kind of smooth this off. It looks very, very natural. You remember that story where God comes to Abraham and he calls his name, and Abraham responds. And he says to Abraham, listen, now I want you to take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and take him to the land of Moriah and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I'm going to show you about. And as the story continues, after traveling for about 3 days, they actually come to the place. And I'll just set this up for you real quick. You have this figure of Abraham. There's a number of different, most of the figures, the major figures, have a number of different poses. But as the story goes, Abraham comes to the place and he builds this altar. He lays the wood on top, and then he binds his son Isaac. And he lays him on the altar. Then, the Bible says he raises his knife to slay Isaac. You remember what happens? The angel of the Lord calls out from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. He says, I'm here. And God says, don't lay your hand upon the boy. And he looks behind him. And you remember what he sees? He sees a ram caught by his horns in a thicket. So what does Abraham do? Abraham takes the ram and he sacrifices the ram in place of his son Isaac, and Isaac's life is spared. That's one story where this particular rock formation is used, and it's actually used in a number of other stories. It's very, 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 very versatile as well. Well, not everything in the Bible takes place in a beautiful grassy area. There are some times in the biblical stories when the children of Israel are out in the wilderness. There's other times when there's famine and this sort of thing. So let me just take this off very quickly and put up our other main background that we use, and that's this wilderness background. It goes on the same way, attaches with the Velcro on the back. You can bring it across. And all of the other overlays that I just showed you, the rock formation, the cliff, the road, all of these things can be used with either background, all right? So now not everything took place also on land either. So there's a rather unique background that I really enjoy that changes this, the way this looks, very, very fast. Take that figure down as well. Call this the river overlay. It has a right side and a left side to it. And just like that, just that quickly, you can actually transform this background into having a river. Now use as your imagination. If there would be a figure that comes out here, all right? A platform. And on that platform, there are a couple pillars. You see that in your mind? And you have a figure of an Egyptian pharaoh that comes out here and a soldier behind him. And over here, you have the figure of Moses, and he has a rod in his hand, and his brother Aaron is right behind him. There's another figure that fits perfectly within this, where every single area that's blue, I can put on, and just like that, it will change it to red. And you have that plague there, the very first plague in the land of Egypt, where God turns the Nile River into blood. Very, very dramatic. Now, not everything takes place outdoors either. So we actually have two different indoor scenes. I'm going to show you one of them. Both of them work the same. Just like what I said before. This one also has extra fabric on the top and on the two sides to be able to use this and mount this right over. You can either mount it directly on the board using the Velcro in the back, or see if I can get this on here properly. All right. Or you can wrap it around the water sky background. Either way, it'll work very, very well. This particular one is called the throne room background, and there are many different items that can go with it. You can make this look as fancy as you want. You can make this look as normal as you want. Let me make it just a normal setting, an indoor setting first. There's a door that goes along with this. There's also some windows that go along with this. And you can decide whether you want it to be daytime or nighttime. Just as quickly as that. One can go right on over the other and change it just like that. But if you want an actual throne room scene, let me just build this very, very quickly, as quickly as I can. There's a beautiful velvet curtain that you can put on this. There's actually a throne room kind of stairs that goes on here. The Pharaoh is seated in many pictures, say with Joseph and also with the Moses stories, even with the Abraham story, when Abraham and Sarah go down to Egypt. There's three different smaller pillars that you can use. You can use as much variety on this. You can make this look any way that you want, either as fancy or as plain as you can possibly imagine. So there's also a very, very large pillar that goes out here. So you can make this look a lot of different ways. I would probably not have those here with that. A lot of different ways that you can do this. One of the challenges of Flannelgraph that is a real challenge is how do you move from an indoor scene like this to an outdoor scene without tearing everything down and going outside? Let me see if I can show you how to do this. Let me just take this down. And I'm going to put that door back up. All right? I'm going to remove this. Oh, good. Our door is still there. Take our window. All right. Would you like it to be daytime or nighttime?
Nighttime.
Nighttime. All right. We'll do this at nighttime. Here's our nighttime sky. Okay? So, as it would look, would you say, are we indoors or outdoors? We're indoors, all right? Now, if I want to go outdoors, there are a couple ways to do this. There are some miniature backgrounds that are designed to fit fairly precisely over the long wall that if I want, I could also add some of these pillars. Would take me from indoors, just like that. Is it still nighttime?
Yes.
Yes, it is. All right. That can move me right outside, and I can continue my story. Once I'm done with that, if it moves back indoors, I can simply take this off, and I can move myself right back indoors as quickly as that. There are actually 4 of these other miniature backgrounds. 2 of them have a nighttime sky. One of them has a daytime sky with a miniature meadow background that is just beautiful. The other one has this same daytime sky, but it actually has a miniature wilderness that goes along. So this is very, very versatile. Now I want to tell you about one of my favorite backgrounds. It's called the cave background. And I don't know if there is any other background that we have that is as versatile and fun to deal with and use of your imagination as this one that we call the cave background. Let me put this up for you very, very quickly. Number one, I think it's beautiful, but it is so versatile and so unique. Now, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination. Some of it you're not going to have to use your imagination very much, because I'm actually going to show you at least a portion of a biblical story that many of you might actually know. Now, as you look at that, our view is from inside the cave looking out, all right? But what if I want to remain inside the cave? What if I want just the cave? Well, before we do that, let's just think about this one. In your mind's eye, could you picture King Saul over here with his back to this door and this opening? And can you picture David and his men, very, very small, off into the corner? And can you see in your mind's eye as David creeps up close and he reaches down and he cuts off a portion of Saul's robe and then retreats back into the background? And then Saul gets up and he leaves. You remember that story? Mm-hmm. That's one way this is used. If you want to make this cave complete, you can take this and you can cover that, and suddenly you're inside a cave. There is no door. Now I'm going to move you into the New Testament. Later on, up in this area, there's going to be another overlay that shows the face of a king looking down through an opening up here. And you know who's down here? A man by the name of Daniel. And he has lions all around him, some of them laying down, some of them roaring, some of them standing up. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. Here's another way this can be used. There's a door that goes along with this, and there's a window that can go along with this. And this is one of my favorite stories. One day in the land of Egypt, 2 servants of Pharaoh offended their master, the king, and he put them into prison. One of them was the chief cupbearer, and the other was the chief baker. And they happened to be placed into the prison where a young man by the name of Joseph, a Hebrew, who had been stolen out of his homeland and been falsely accused of something he hadn't even done, was in charge of this dungeon and this area, this prison. He came in one morning, and what he noticed about them is that they were very, very sad. And he asked them, "Why are you so sad?" They said, "Well, each of us have dreamed a dream, and there's nobody here to interpret our dreams." Joseph said, "Well, don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dream." And so the chief cupbearer started, and he said, "Well, in my dream, I came across a vine, and there were 3 clusters of grapes on this vine, and I had Pharaoh's cup in my hand. So I squeezed the juice from the grapes into Pharaoh's cup, and then I placed it in Pharaoh's hand." And Joseph said, "This is the interpretation of your dream. The 3 clusters of grapes represent 3 days. Within 3 days' time, Pharaoh is going to restore you to your position. And once again, you'll be placing the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Well, when the baker heard that, he said, oh, I also had a dream. In my dream, I was carrying 3 baskets of baked goods on my head. And the birds were eating the baked goods, the bread, out of the top basket. And Joseph had to say to him, the interpretation of your dream is this: within 3 days, Pharaoh is going to lift your head off of you and actually impale you on a pole. And the birds of the air are going to eat the flesh off your body. And so it happened 3 days later. Pharaoh had a birthday, and he gave a great celebration to all of his officers. And he elevated the cupbearer back to his original position. And once again, he placed the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he took the chief baker, and he impaled him on a pole. But Joseph had asked the chief cupbearer, when you're restored to your position, will you remember me to Pharaoh the king, because I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and even here I haven't done anything wrong that I should be in this prison. You know how that story ends? The Bible says, but the chief cupbearer forgot about Joseph. And you know how long Joseph stayed in this prison? 2 more years. 2 more years. Now this scene will also be used in the book of Acts with, say, the Philippian jailer. Remember, with Paul and Silas? And so there'll be some stocks here and this sort of thing. The Philippian jailer will come through this door. What must I do to be saved? If we would go back to our other piece, take these off, there's going to be another figure that's going to be created that will precisely cover this opening, only instead of a daytime view, it's going to have a nighttime view with a road going off into the distance, with a small little village off in the distance with light shining down. You know what the name of that village is? Bethlehem. And inside of this area, you're going to have Mary and Joseph and sheep and the manger and this sort of thing for the birth of Jesus Christ. Then, in another place, this will go back on, and there will be a ledge that will be formed here. But you won't see a body on that ledge. All you'll see is the wrapping of clothes and claws from a body that's no longer there, and a napkin off by itself over in a corner. And this will also be used for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I love this background. This is one of the most amazing backgrounds I think that our artist ever created for us. And one final one. Another very, very unique background that I have never seen before, that we created for one primary reason, and actually we went through all the expense of this really for one story. Though it's going to be used now that we've created it, we're going to be using it for a few others. This is beautiful. This is the heaven background. In the heaven background, we have the presence of God up on the throne. You'll notice that he's not defined. You can't see his features. However, he's there. And we use this particular background to tell a story that is not specifically even a Bible story, but it tells and communicates a biblical truth. The Bible says that God created the heavens and the earth. And not much is said about the creation of the heavens, but we find from other places in Ezekiel and Isaiah and other places that there was a time when God created the spirit world. Messengers, angels, multitudes of them. They stand before the throne of God. And these angels often are called the sons of God. And they worship God. They're in his presence. They're in his holiness. But God also created some very, very special angels. Archangels, many different types. And they're created to be messengers to the people of God. Now, if you look very, very close at this, you'll see something maybe that's a little bit unusual. This angel here, if you look at him carefully, he looks very, very Middle Eastern. He looks very, very Jewish. We have an angel that would work very much for an Asian people group, and we also have an angel that would work for a black or African type of group. Now here's a very, very special figure. Any idea what this figure might represent? Looks very, very unusual than the rest, doesn't he? I think very, very beautiful. This is actually the figure that we use for Lucifer before he fell into sin. You remember, Lucifer was given a very, very exalted position by God, but he wasn't satisfied with that position. And he said in his heart that he was going to exalt himself even above the Most High God. And because of that rebellion, because of that arrogance, God cast him out of heaven. This angel, now we know as Satan, and he started out as Lucifer, but also the Bible says that he also took some of the angels with him. Now these fallen angels are now known as demons. And we use this particular background to be able to demonstrate that truth. This background is also going to be used with the stories of Job. You remember how God called the sons of God together, these angels, and the Bible says that Satan was among them. And God said to Satan, "So where have you been?" And Satan, what did he say? "Oh, just going around back and forth, to and fro." And then there's going to be a scene that'll be placed up here that shows Job, shows his affluence, shows his flocks and his herds and his donkeys and his sheep and all the affluence. He was a very, very wealthy man. And God and Satan will have a discussion about his servant Job. And then this story will transition to the actual story of Job on the earth, and it will go back and forth. This figure this background will also be used at the very, very end of the series when it is done, where we have the Apostle John on the island of Patmos. He's called up into the throne room of God, and at least some of the preliminary things about the second coming. So these are the backgrounds of the By Design Visual series. All of these were created by our artist, Ron Ferris, from Chicago, Illinois. Ron has done just a masterful job with all of this artwork. And figure-wise, he's actually created over 500 biblical figures already. But the Genesis series, that's what's coming out right now. With the Genesis series, you get all of these backgrounds, so you'll have the basis for everything that you will ever need for any story that the By Design Visual series ever creates. But the Genesis series is broken up into 4 different story series. The Beginnings deals with 11 stories from Genesis 1 through 11. The Abraham series deals with 18 stories from the life of Abraham. The Jacob series has 14 stories. The Joseph series has 13 stories. And everything that you see here also comes in what we call the Digital Storytellers Edition. It was created on by hand, but written with a stylus hooked up to an Apple computer. So everything that we have is also digital. So you can get a digital version of this. It works on an iPad. You can project it up on a screen for large crowds. You can see it on your computer. And we're also writing stories for all of these, so you can use this either with traditional flannelgraph or any of the modern technologies that you want. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I love showing people this series, and I can't wait to show you what's going to come out next. The next series that's going to come out is going to be the life of Christ. It'll contain 76 stories from the life of Jesus, starting with the birth of John the Baptist and going all the way to after his death on the cross, when he's raised from the dead. And he gives that last command and the Great Commission to his disciples to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. Then Jesus Christ goes back up to the Father's throne. 76 stories from the life of Christ. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks.